Story 1. I found my employee badge hanging from a stranger's uniform. Not a copy, not one that looked similar. My badge, the one clipped to my chest. I was staring at it through my binoculars from nearly 200 yards away, while someone wearing a National Park Service uniform walked between the trees. The badge swung against his jacket. My name was on it. And he was heading toward the ranger station. I grabbed my radio so fast I almost dropped it. Dispatch, this is Ranger 4. Possible unauthorized person in uniform near Station C. Static. Then a voice answered. My voice. Copy that. I'm already checking it out. I froze. Because I hadn't transmitted yet. I hadn't pressed the button. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. The figure disappeared into the darkness between the pines. Then my radio crackled again. My voice repeated the same sentence. Exactly the same, word for word. That's when I realized something was very wrong. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 32 years old, and in October of 2024, I worked night patrol at a remote ranger station inside Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. Most night shifts were painfully boring. A few vehicle checks, trail inspections, the occasional lost camper. Nothing dramatic. That night started exactly the same way. The weather was cold but clear. No storms, no visitors after dark, no reports of suspicious activity. I signed a patrol log at 10 p.m. and headed out in my truck to complete the usual perimeter checks around the closed campground. Attached was a screenshot from the motel security system. The first few hours were uneventful. The timestamp read 1:17 a.m. Verified locked showed the ice machine beneath the rear wildlife sightings. Standing beside it was a man in a motel uniform. Everything felt normal. Looking directly at the camera. Until 12:43 I recognized him instantly. That's when I noticed something strange. It was the missing clerk from the newspaper clipping. Roads showed fresh tire tracks. Same uniform. That shouldn't have been possible. Same age. The road had been closed for nearly 2 weeks due to a washout farther north. The camera only sees no authorized vehicles were scheduled. I never replied near that section. But sometimes, at first, I usually around 1:17 in the morning earlier. I think about that screenshot. But when I checked the patrol records, because there was one detail I noticed after staring at it, the tracks were fresh enough that the missing clerk wasn't looking at the camera. Someone had been there recently. I followed them. He was looking at something standing just behind forested terrain where radio coverage became unreliable. The train doors slammed shut. My headlights illuminated, and that's when I saw myself still sitting inside the carriage. Everything beyond that not someone who looked a little like me. The tracks continued for nearly a mile jacket, before stopping. Same backpack, not same exhausted face staring through the glass. Stopping. The train began pulling away while that version of me slowly raised a hand. I got out with my flashlight and pointed toward the dark station behind me. Immediately felt and all I could think was, no wind. If I'm standing here, no distant, then who the hell is that? Just stillness. For a second, I honestly forgot how to move. The tracks ended. The reflection excuse didn't work. There was nothing because the train had already passed beneath a dead section of lighting. No explanation. And I was watching that figure from outside. Then it happened again. Then the train disappeared into the tunnel. Leaving me alone on a platform that suddenly felt much quieter than it should have. Not similar. I wish I could say that was where the story started. It wasn't Ranger. It started about 3 hours earlier. The transmission lasted 27 seconds before dissolving and working late shifts as a maintenance coordinator for a commercial property company in Chicago. Nothing exciting. That's when I realized I had lost contact entirely and dealing with problems. I returned to my truck wanted to handle during the day. That night had already been rough. The uneasy feeling followed me the entire way. Downtown had kept me every few minutes I checked my mirrors. And by the time I reached the subway station, yet I couldn't shake the sensation that the last train was scheduled to leave at 12:42 a.m. I remember time I reached station because I almost missed nearly 2 a.m. The station was mostly empty except for a woman reading a paperback and a guy wearing a gray hoodie near the far end of the parking area. Nothing seemed unusual. My patrol vehicle was the only truck present. At least not then. Or at least the first strange thing happened after the third stop. Something worse. The woman with the book got off. Entries in the patrol but a few minutes later, I noticed the same book sitting on a seat. The second appeared 20 minutes after mine. I figured she forgot it. Same handwriting. Then I realized the book was open to a page that had several words circled in pen. Mine. The circled words read, at the page. Don't my stomach dropped. I had never stared at it longer than I should have. Yet every letter was probably a coincidence. I would write. People write random things. Even the tiny mistakes matched my habits. Still, the time something claimed I had returned from patrol at 12:18 a.m. I moved to another seat. A few minutes later, I had been miles away and the gray hoodie had changed cars. Someone
He was
had
now
forced
sitting
it,
3 rows
or
behind
something
me.
impossible was
That
happening.
wasn't unusual either.
I checked security
Except
footage. I never saw
station
him
had
walk through the
cameras covering
connecting
every
doors.
entrance.
The
I
footage
checked
showed
my
me
phone.
leaving at 10:03
No
p.m.
signal.
Typical underground
Then at
service
12:18
issues.
a.m.
Then
another Ranger
I heard
truck
something
arrived.
odd.
My
Not
truck.
loud.
The exact
fake
same
static
vehicle.
coming from the emergency
The camera
intercom
angle
near
wasn't
the train
perfect,
doors, but I could
The
clearly
static
see a
lasted
ranger
maybe
stepping
5
out.
seconds.
My
And a
height,
voice cut through.
my build,
Next
my
stop,
uniform,
do not
my
exit.
face.
Everybody in
He
the car
entered the
looked
station.
up. A
Signed
second
the
later,
log,
the normal
stayed
automated
for 4
announcement
minutes,
played,
then
naming
left.
the actual station.
I watched the
Nobody
footage 3
reacted
times.
after that.
Each
Like they
viewing
hadn't
made
heard
me
the first
feel
message
sicker.
at all.
The
I
timestamp
remember
was
looking
authentic.
around,
The
waiting for
video
someone
wasn't
else to
corrupted.
comment on it.
Someone
Nobody
who looked
did.
exactly like me.
That's when I started
had
feeling
entered the
uneasy.
station while
The
I
train
was still on
continued
patrol.
moving. More passengers
But this
got
time
off.
it was different.
Fewer got on.
The footage showed
By 1
more
a.m. there
detail.
were only 6 people
When the
left.
figure left the building,
Then something happened
he
that I
looked
still can't explain.
directly into
I checked
the
the route
camera,
map above the doors.
not casually.
One of the station lights
intentionally.
blinked on,
Almost
then
like he knew
another,
someone would
then
watch
another.
later.
Then
It
he
looked
smiled.
like the train was skipping
I had
backward
never
along
seen
the
myself
road
smile
instead of
like
forward.
that before. I pulled out my
It didn't
phone
look
and opened
human.
the transit app.
Not because it was
According to
monstrous,
the app, we should
because
have been
it felt
approaching
practiced.
Monroe Station.
like someone had studied
Instead,
how humans
the
smile.
onboard map showed
and
us
gotten
heading
it
toward a
slightly
station
wrong.
we'd already passed 20 minutes earlier.
I shut the
The
monitor
doors
off.
opened. The
For the
station
next
sign
hour, I
outside
stayed
wasn't
beside the
Monroe.
station.
It
Doors
wasn't any
locked,
station name
lights
I
on,
recognized.
radio beside
Nobody
me.
got on. Nobody got off.
Trying to convince
The doors
myself there was
closed
a
again.
rational
The
explanation.
train continued moving.
At 3:11
The
a.m.,
guy in the gray
station
hoodie
phone
was
rang.
staring directly at me now.
Hardly anyone
Not
called that
constantly,
number after midnight.
Just every time I looked up,
I
like he
answered
knew I was
immediately.
watching him.
No
Then something
response.
worse happened. Only breathing.
The overhead lights
Slow.
flickered.
Only
Steady.
once. Just a quick flash. But
Then a
during that
voice spoke.
flash, I could have sworn
My
every
voice.
passenger in the car was facing me. The lights returned to normal instantly. Everyone appeared to be sitting naturally again. Looking at phones, looking out windows, looking
My
anywhere
badge was
except
gone.
me.
The
My heart
clip
was
remained
pounding
attached
by
to my
then.
uniform.
I told myself
The
I
badge
was
itself
tired.
had vanished.
Overtired
I
people
searched
notice
everywhere.
weird things.
Desk,
That's all.
floor,
Then
truck,
my phone
bathroom.
vibrated.
Nothing.
Somehow I had one
It
bar
was
of
simply
signal.
gone.
A text
That's when I
message
remembered
appeared
the
from an
figure in
unknown
the
number.
woods.
It
The
contained
badge
only
swinging
3
from
words.
his chest.
Stay
My
on
badge.
board.
The one that
I
had
stared at
somehow
the screen.
disappeared from
Another
me.
message arrived immediately.
A loud knock
Don't follow
echoed
him.
through the station.
I looked up.
3 knocks.
The guy in the hoodie
Slow,
was standing now.
measured.
The
I
train
nearly dropped my
slowed for another
flashlight.
stop.
Nobody should
The
have
doors
been there.
opened.
He stepped
visitor
onto the
parking
platform
area
and
was
turned
empty.
around. No vehicles.
Then he looked directly
lights,
at me and nodded.
Nothing.
Like he wanted
Another
me to
knock
follow.
followed.
Then
Another.
every instinct told me not to move.
I approached the front
the
window
doors
carefully.
closed.
The
The
darkness
darkness
outside
outside
us
seemed thicker than
I
usual.
remember laughing
My
nervously at
flashlight
myself
beam
after
reflected
that.
against the
The
glass.
whole situation
For
felt
several
ridiculous.
seconds I saw nothing.
Creepy,
Then
sure,
a silhouette
but
stepped beneath the
ridiculous.
floodlight. Then the train
ranger
entered a tunnel. My
and
height.
didn't come out.
My height.
5
my
minutes
face.
passed. 10.
My badge.
15.
He stood motionless, staring
Underground
directly
tunnels
at the
on that
building.
route weren't nearly
I
that
backed
long.
away instantly.
People were noticing now.
My heart hammered so hard
A man
it
near
hurt.
the front car
The
checked his
figure
watch
never
repeatedly.
attempted to enter.
A woman
Never
asked if
moved.
anyone had service.
Never spoke.
Nobody answered.
Just watched.
The train never
and then it
slowed.
happened again.
It just
The
kept
radio
moving through
crackled beside
darkness.
me.
Then,
Ethan,
without
Don't
warning,
open the door.
it stopped.
My voice. coming
Complete
from
silence.
outside.
The lights remained on.
The figure under the floodlights
doors
slowly
stayed
raised
closed.
a handheld radio.
Outside the windows
At the
was
same
nothing.
moment, another
except
transmission
black
arrived from
concrete.
inside the station
We sat
frequency.
there for maybe 2
also
minutes.
my voice.
Then the
Both
intercom
spoke
crackled again.
simultaneously. One outside,
Final stop.
one somewhere
Those
else.
were the only
Same
words.
same
The
time.
train started moving immediately
ran.
afterward.
Not toward the door.
The passengers
toward
were
the vehicle
confused.
bay.
So did I.
I jumped into my truck
Because
and
according to the
accelerated
route,
through the rear access
we
road.
weren't anywhere
The
near
figure
the final
remained
stop.
standing beneath the light as I left.
Then we arrived at the
chasing,
station
never
where everything
reacting.
went wrong.
Just watching.
The platform looked real enough. Concrete walls, benches, signs.
For nearly 20 minutes,
the
I
signs
drove
were
without
blank.
stopping.
No
Eventually,
station
I regained
name,
radio coverage.
no advertisements,
Dispatch
nothing.
finally answered.
just
the real
white
dispatch.
panels.
I reported everything.
The doors
the
opened.
duplicate vehicle.
3
the
passengers
duplicate
exited.
ranger. The footage.
Nobody
the badge,
entered.
The phone call.
Then I
There was a
noticed
long
something
silence.
disturbing.
Then dispatch asked a
The
question
people
I'll
getting
never
off
forget.
weren't
Ethan,
walking toward
why are
the
you
stairs.
reporting this now? I told
They
them
were
exactly
standing
what
still,
time it was.
just standing on the
3:47
platform,
a.m. Watching
Another
the train.
pause.
The doors
Then
closed.
dispatch said
the
they had
train
logged my
pulled
report
away,
45
and
minutes
every
earlier.
one of of those people
Submitted
remained
by me,
motionless until they
using my
vanished from
employee
sight.
ID.
The
After
caller
that,
had sounded completely
I decided
normal.
I was getting off
I
at the
pulled
next
over
stop no
immediately.
matter what.
My hands were
I
shaking
didn't care
so
where it
badly I could
was.
barely hold the radio.
The next station arrived 8
Someone
minutes
had
later.
reported the incident before.
This time
I
I stepped out
experienced it,
immediately,
using my
and that's when I
identity,
saw myself
using
inside
my
the
voice,
train.
using
The moment I told
information
you
I
about
hadn't
it at the
yet
beginning.
discovered. The train
By sunrise,
disappeared into darkness,
search teams inspected
leaving
the
me
station.
alone.
The
Nobody
station was
there.
empty.
No
No
duplicate
employees,
ranger,
no
no extra
announcements,
vehicle, no
nothing.
sounds except distant
The security
ventilation
footage from
fans.
12:18
I
a.m.
climbed the
was
stairs
gone.
2 at a time.
Only that section.
The exit gate was
Everything
unlocked.
before and after remained
Outside,
intact.
I found myself in
The
an
patrol
industrial
log
district
page
I had never
containing
seen
the duplicate
before.
signature had
Warehouses
vanished.
too, empty
Removed
parking lots,
cleanly.
no traffic, as if it had never
No
existed.
people.
I checked
Officially,
my phone.
the event
The
was
time
written
read
off as equipment
3:17
malfunction
a.m.
combined with
Nearly
fatigue.
2 hours had vanished.
Nobody believed my report.
According to my route,
At least not
I should have been
publicly.
home by
I
1:30.
resigned 6 months
I started
later.
walking.
I couldn't stay
After
there.
about 10 minutes,
Couldn't
I found a
continue
gas
working
station.
nights.
The cashier
Couldn't
looked
keep
relieved when
wondering
I
who had
entered.
walked into that
"You came
station
from the
wearing my
station?"
face.
He asked immediately.
But that's not the
I
part that
nodded.
still keeps me awake.
He stared at me
2
for
years
several
after I
seconds.
left Yellowstone.
Then he asked which
I
train.
received an envelope
When I told
with
him,
no return
he looked
address.
genuinely confused.
Inside,
He said
was
that
a
line
single
stopped running
photograph.
after midnight because of track
the
repairs.
image showed Station
There shouldn't
C
have been any
beneath
trains
the
at all.
floodlight. The
I thought he was
timestamp
joking.
matched the night of the
He
incident.
wasn't. He
Standing
even showed me
outside
the
the transit
building
was the
alert
figure
online.
wearing my uniform.
Service suspended
My
from
badge
midnight
hung
until
from his
5
chest.
a.m.
He was looking
I ended
directly
up
at
calling
the
a
camera,
rideshare home.
smiling.
The
On
next
the back
day,
of
I
the
contacted
photograph,
the transit authority.
someone had written
They had
6
no
words.
record of any train operating
You left
during
before
that
your
time
shift
window.
ended.
No
I turned the
delays,
photo over
no
again.
emergency reports.
That's why I noticed
Nothing.
something I'd missed.
A week later,
There were 2 figures
curiosity
in the
got
picture.
the better of me.
One outside.
I requested station
beneath the
security
floodlight.
footage through a friend
Colin,
who worked for the
Dodd,
city. The footage showed me entering the station
Dodd,
at 12:39 a.m.
You left.
It showed
Dodd.
me waiting alone
And
on the
another
platform,
visible
completely alone.
through the station
No
window,
woman with a book,
sitting
no
at
man
the
in
desk,
a gray hoodie,
watching
no other
him.
passengers.
Both
Then the
of
recording
them
cut out for
were
nearly
me.
3 hours.
Story 2.
When the feed
The
returned,
flashlight slipped
it
from my
showed me
hand when I
exiting
saw
a
my
completely
name on
different
the
station
employee
across
roster.
town. Not because
Alone
my
again.
name was there.
The
because
footage
the hire
ended
date
there.
beside it was
I
3
haven't
years
used the
older
subway
than
late at
mine.
night since.
And the
But about
person
6
assigned
months
to that
ago,
employee
I
number was
received
standing
another
50
text from
yards
an
away
unknown
in the
number.
darkness.
Watching
No
me.
greeting, no
The radio
explanation.
on my belt
Just a
suddenly
single
crackled.
sentence.
Unit 12.
You got off at the
report your
wrong
position.
stop. And a
It
few
was my
seconds later,
supervisor's voice.
before I could respond,
Normal.
a second
Routine.
message arrived.
But
Before I
other
could
one
answer,
made it home.
another voice responded
Story
first.
3. My voice.
I was staring at the
Coming from
security
somewhere
monitor
deep in the
when the
forest.
missing employee walked
Unit
across
12,
camera 12.
North Trail
The
checkpoint.
problem was that I was
The
standing
exact
next to
location
the
where
police
I was
officer
standing.
who had spent 3
I didn't
days
press the
searching for
radio
him.
button. I wasn't speaking.
The man on the screen stopped
Yet
directly
someone
beneath
had
the
just checked in
floodlight,
as me,
lifted his
and
head
that's
toward
when I
the camera
realized I
and
wasn't
smiled.
alone out there.
Then
My
every
name is
monitor
Ryan
in the
Mercer.
security office went
I'm
black.
29
at the
years
exact
old,
same second.
and this happened during my night shift
And
job
somewhere
as
out
a
in the
wilderness
warehouse,
security
a
ranger
metal
at
door
a private
slammed hard enough to
conservation
shake the
reserve
walls.
in northern Montana.
For a few seconds,
The
nobody
reserve
moved.
covered thousands
The
of
police
acres of
officer
protected
looked at me.
forest and
I looked
mountain
back at
terrain.
him.
Neither
Most
of us
people
said a
imagine
word.
national parks when they
Because
think
the
of
man
ranger
we had
work.
just seen,
But this place was
Ethan
privately
Morales,
owned and heavily
and
monitored.
Ethan had disappeared.
My job was
72
simple.
hours earlier.
Patrol roads.
My name is
check
Jason
fences,
Reed.
monitor
I was
restricted
28
areas,
years old at
and
the time,
respond to emergency
working
calls
overnight
after dark.
security at a large
Most
distribution
nights were
warehouse
boring.
outside
The kind of
Columbus,
boring that
Ohio.
makes every shift
The
feel
facility sat
identical.
alone near an
You
industrial
drive,
district
you
surrounded
check
by
logs,
trucking yards and
you
empty
fill out
roads.
patrol logs. At
You
night,
listen
the
to
place
static
felt
on the radio.
abandoned.
Just
eventually,
eventually,
shipping
containers
containers,
arrives.
loading docks,
At least
forklifts,
that's how it usually
and miles
worked.
of shadows.
The trouble
My shift
started
ran
during
from
my
10
third
p.m.
week.
until 6 a.m.
I arrived for my shift
Most
around
nights were
8
boring.
p.m.
Patrols,
The operations
camera checks,
building was quiet
incident
except for
reports.
the hum of fluorescent
The
lights
kind of
and the
job
sound
where
of
you spend
keyboards
more
from the
time fighting
dispatch
sleep
office.
than dealing with actual
I
problems.
signed in and noticed a
Then
strange
Ethan
expression
disappeared.
on the receptionist's
Ethan worked the
face.
same shift as
She
me.
looked confused,
Friendly guy,
almost
32 years
concerned.
old, always
Then she
drinking
asked her
energy
question.
drinks, always
Ryan,
talking too
didn't you
much.
already leave for patrol?
3 nights before
I
everything
laughed.
happened,
I
he
assumed she
signed
was
into the
joking,
patrol log at
but she
1:08
wasn't
a.m.
smiling.
Then he vanished.
For several
No
seconds, she
sign out,
genuinely
no
seemed
resignation,
convinced she had
no
already
emergency
spoken to me
contact,
earlier that
nothing.
evening.
Eventually,
truck
she
remained
shook
in the
her head
parking
and
lot.
blamed it on
His radio was
exhaustion.
found near
I
Dock
forgot
C,
about it,
but
at
Ethan
least for a
himself was
while.
gone. That's when
The
I
police
noticed
searched the
something
property.
worse.
Nothing.
The
They
employee
searched
locker
nearby
assigned to me
fields.
was already
Nothing.
unlocked.
3 days passed.
Inside
no
sat my
leads,
flashlight,
no witnesses,
my notebook,
no answers,
my radio charger.
That's when management
Everything
hired
exactly
a
where I
replacement
usually
security
left it.
guard, a guy named
The problem
Mark.
was that I hadn't
He arrived
used
on
that
a
locker
Thursday
yet.
night. Tall,
Management assigned it to me
mid-40s,
that
clean
morning.
uniform,
Nobody
no
else should have
personality,
known it belonged
the
to
kind
me.
of person who seemed
I reported
impossible
it.
to read.
The supervisor
first,
assumed another
nothing fit
employee had made
strange.
a mistake.
Then he said something
That
that made my
explanation
stomach
sounded
tighten.
reasonable enough.
We were
So I
walking
let it
toward the
go,
security office
but
when
the
he
feeling
glanced
stayed
toward
with
Doc
me.
C. Something
The
about it
missing
felt
guy
wrong. Disappeared
a
over
little
there,
too specific,
right?
a little
stopped
too
walking.
personal.
Nobody had
Around
mentioned
midnight,
Ethan.
I started my
Not
patrol
yet.
route along
Not
the
to
northern
him.
perimeter road.
I remember staring at Mark.
The forest was
How'd you know
unusually
about that?
quiet.
He
No
shrugged.
wind,
Heard
no
people
animal
talking.
sounds.
Maybe that should have been
No
enough.
movement.
Maybe I should have
Only
let
the
it go.
distant hum
But
of my
something
truck
felt
engine.
off. Because nobody
The
had been
isolation
talking.
out there could feel overwhelming.
Management specifically instructed
especially
everyone
after
not
midnight.
to discuss the
That's why the
investigation with
radio
new
mattered.
employees. And
Even
Mark
when
had only
nobody
been on
was
site
talking,
for 15
Hearing
minutes.
occasional
Still,
static
I
reminded you
ignored
that
it.
other people
At least I
existed.
tried to.
At
Then things got
12:43
stranger.
a.m.,
Dispatch
around midnight,
requested a
we were
status
monitoring
update.
cameras.
I reached
Mark
for the
suddenly
radio.
pointed at a
Before
hallway
I could
screen.
answer, another
That's where they
transmission
found his radio.
interrupted. Again.
Unit 12.
Nobody had told him that.
Fence line
I
secure.
knew nobody had
My
told
voice.
him. The radio
Again.
location had
Every
never been
word
released
sounded
publicly.
identical.
Not
The
even
same
the warehouse
tone,
workers
the same
knew.
pacing, the
I
same
looked at
slight
him.
rasp I get when
He
I'm
looked
tired.
back.
The
Then he
dispatcher
smiled
acknowledged
slightly.
the response.
Not enough to seem
like nothing
friendly.
unusual had
Just
happened.
enough to make me uncomfortable.
I stared at the radio in disbelief.
That's when I noticed something
Then I
worse.
asked dispatch who had just
The
transmitted.
timestamp on
A
camera
pause
12
followed.
suddenly jumped
Then she said
backward.
something that made
Only
my
by
stomach
2
tighten.
minutes.
You did.
Then it corrected
I stopped
itself.
my truck immediately.
I frowned.
The dispatcher
system
sounded
never did
completely
that.
serious.
Ever.
According to her
moments later,
system, the
camera 9
transmission came
flickered.
from my assigned
Static.
radio,
Then normal.
the one sitting
Then
in my
static
hand.
again. That's
Mark
when I
kept staring
realized
at the
something
screen.
wasn't right.
Almost
I
like he
returned
was
to
waiting for
headquarters
something.
after completing patrol.
Bad cameras.
The
He asked.
dispatcher reviewed the
I
radio
nodded.
logs.
Sometimes the
But
transmission
honestly,
was there.
I was lying.
Timestamp
The
included.
cameras had worked
Employee
perfectly for
ID
years.
included.
Everything appeared
1:43 a.m.
legitimate. Dispatch
The only
called.
problem was that I
Routine
never made
check-in.
the call.
Nobody
Nothing
had an
unusual.
explanation.
But while
They
I was
blamed
talking on the
equipment
radio,
malfunction.
I
heard
wanted to
another
believe
voice
them.
underneath the static.
But the incidents
whisper.
kept growing stranger.
Very faint.
The next night, I
couldn't
arrived
make
early.
out most of it.
I wanted answers.
Only one word.
The operations
Ethan.
office was mostly
I
empty.
pulled the radio away
While
from
waiting
my
for
ear.
shift briefing,
The whisper
I noticed an
disappeared.
old employee directory
Dispatch sounded
sitting on a
normal.
shelf. When I asked
Out
if
of
they heard
curiosity,
anything,
I opened it.
They said no. Most pages
That's when I
contained former
realized
staff
Mark
was
records.
watching me. Retired
Not the
employees,
monitors.
transferred employees,
Just standing
people
there,
who no longer
watching.
worked there. And the second I looked back,
Then I found
he
my
turned
name.
away.
Like
Ryan
he'd been caught.
Mercer. The rest of
Employee
the night called
ID
by.
4512.
Nothing happened. No
The same
incidents.
ID
no
assigned to
alarms.
me.
Your
The
signs of
photograph
Ethan.
wasn't mine.
Morning came.
The hire date was
Shift
from
ended.
3 years
I went
earlier.
home.
But I
The
couldn't
file
stop
listed
thinking
dozens
about
of
Mark.
completed patrols.
The
Performance
next month felt
reviews,
worse.
training
The
certifications.
moment I arrived,
years of
I
employment,
noticed something
all
unusual.
under my identity.
Mark's patrol
I stood there
report
staring
was
at the
already
page,
completed.
unable to
Every
move.
checkpoint, because
Every
according to that
inspection,
file,
every
I had
time
been
stamp,
working there long
the
before I
problem,
was ever hired.
Several entries were logged before
And
he
then it
even
happened
clocked
again.
in. A
I
voice
checked
behind
twice.
me said my name.
Same result.
I turned around. The
Nobody stood
timestamps
there.
were impossible.
The office was empty.
When I asked him
The
about
hallway
it,
beyond
he
remained
laughed.
dark.
Must be
Yet
a
I
computer
knew I had
glitch.
heard someone speak.
Then he took the
Not over the
clipboard
radio,
and walked away
not through a speaker.
too quickly. Like
Directly
he didn't want
behind
me
me.
examining it longer.
That night I requested access
That's when
to
I noticed
archived
something
security
worse.
footage.
Camera
The
12
supervisor
started
reluctantly
moving.
agreed.
Not
We
physically,
reviewed recordings
the
from
image
previous
itself.
months. At
Like
first,
someone was
nothing appeared
controlling the
unusual.
camera remotely.
Then we checked footage
Slowly
from 6
panning
months
across
before my
empty loading
employment.
docks. The timestamp
Then
clearly
stopping.
predated my
Then
hiring
moving
date.
again. A ranger walked
I
through
checked
the operations building.
The control system.
Same height.
No user
Same
logged
build.
in.
Same
Nobody
uniform.
was operating it.
The image quality
Yet the
wasn't
camera
perfect.
kept moving.
But when he turned
Eventually
toward
it
the
settled
camera,
on one
my
specific
blood ran
location.
cold.
A
It was
chain
me,
link fence behind
not someone
warehouse
who
section
resembled
D.
me, not
and
someone
stayed
similar.
there for
Me.
nearly 20
The
minutes.
supervisor became visibly uncomfortable.
As if it was watching something.
He claimed the footage
or
was
someone.
corrupted.
A
At
camera
2:17
glitch,
a.m.,
a database
motion
error.
alert triggered.
But I could
Same
tell he
area.
didn't believe his own
Fence line.
explanation.
Mark
Neither
immediately
did I.
stood up.
That's
Before
when I
I could
noticed
even
something
react.
worse.
I'll check it.
Nobody seemed surprised.
Something about the speed of
Not
his
really.
response bothered me.
Every time I raised
Most
concerns,
guards complained about
employees
patrols.
exchanged
Mark
nervous
almost seemed
glances.
excited. Some refused
I
to
watched him
discuss it.
leave through the monitor
Others
system.
changed the subject
Flashlight.
entirely. Radio.
Eventually, one
Normal.
older ranger pulled
Until
me
he
aside.
reached the fence.
His name was
Then
Tom.
camera 12 froze.
He had worked there for nearly
Static
20
flooded
years.
the screen.
After
The image
making sure nobody
disappeared.
else could hear us,
When it returned
he
30
asked me a
seconds
question.
later,
Has he
Mark was
started
gone.
answering your radio yet?
completely gone.
I felt my
No
stomach
sign
drop.
of him anywhere.
Not
The because of the
checked every
question.
camera. Because
Nothing.
Tom asked it
No
like he
footage of
already
him
knew the
leaving.
answer.
No footage of him returning.
I demanded an
Nothing.
explanation.
Then my radio crackled.
Tom hesitated.
Jason.
Then
I
he told me
froze.
something
The
disturbing.
voice wasn't dispatch. It
3
wasn't
years earlier,
management.
another
wasn't
ranger
Mark.
named Ryan Mercer had
It
worked
sounded
the reserve.
exactly like Ethan.
Nobody knew much about him. He appeared suddenly, worked night shifts, rarely socialized, then disappeared.
No resignation, no transfer, just gone. Official records claimed he never existed, except people remembered him. And apparently he looked exactly like me. I laughed at first. It sounded ridiculous, but Tom wasn't joking. His hands were shaking. The fear in his eyes felt genuine. That's when I realized he truly believed what he was saying. The transmission ended immediately. Became unbearable. I called back. Every patrol included strange radio transmissions. Nothing. Every shift contained. That's when I realized my hands were shaking. Sometimes because I caught Ethan's radio had been recovered 3 days earlier. Sometimes headlights appeared behind me and vanished. Locker. Sometimes dispatch logged reports under my name before I submitted them. But this time it was different. Static. Random at 2:17 a.m. during unexplained noises, I spotted another truck parked along the service nearly 40 minutes later, walking calmly through the front entrance. Same model, like nothing had happened. Same unit. When I asked where he'd been, my truck, he gave a simple answer. The engine was running the perimeter. Headlights illuminated the trees. No explanation. I approached cautiously. No concern. Nothing. Nobody sat inside. I almost quit. The driver's door stood open, but the next night a patrol log rested on the seat. Police returned to conduct another search. One officer remained in our security office reviewing footage. That's when we saw Ethan walking across radio 12. Future the moment that started this story. Future locations. The moment everything fell apart. Future actions. After the monitors went black, as alarms started activating throughout the facility. Dock alarms, motion alarms, emergency exits. All at once. Someone had documented the warehouse erupted before it occurred. The officer grabbed his flashlight. I grabbed mine, and together we headed outside. Measured. Rain had started approaching through the trees. Heavy. I grabbed my flashlight. The floodlights barely cut through the darkness. The beam swept across the trail toward the fence line. Toward the exact the radio crackled. Camera 12. My voice emerged from the speaker. Obsessed with. Calm. Then steady. We found something. Close. Footprints. Turn around. Fresh. Dozens of them. Not leading away. Nearby. Leading toward a not transmitted building. From miles away. A building that had supposedly been locked for months. Directly behind me. The door stood open. When I realized I was no longer hearing the radio. The officer entered. I was hearing an actual person speaking. Inside, we found old storage shelves. A man stood at the edge of the tree line. Dust, wearing nothing else, until the officer shined his flashlight into the back corner. His face remained hidden in shadow. Sleeping somehow I already knew what I would see. Water bottles. He took one step dozens of printed photographs. My heart nearly stopped. Illuminated his every photo showed warehouse employees. Hundreds of pictures taken secretly. Some from parking lots. Some from inside the building. Identical. Some from outside people's homes. Every detail matched. Then we found Ethan. Not Ethan himself. A photograph. Neither of us taken only hours earlier. Neither of us moved. Standing beside someone whose face was partially hidden, but not hidden enough. It was Mark. The officer immediately called for backup. We simply stared at each other. Searched the property. Then he smiled. Sign of each man. A slow. Nothing. They vanished. Confident. Again. Knowing smile. By sunrise, investigators were everywhere. Back into the darkness. Interviews. Search warrants. Questions. I chased him. Nobody could find Mark. At least I tried to. No employment records. The forest swallowed him almost immediately. Nothing. No footprints. The identification he'd provided was fake. Every part of it. The company that hired him couldn't explain how he'd passed screening. It was like he appeared from nowhere. No broken branches. And disappeared back into nowhere. As if he had never been past. The case slowly went cold. I resigned 2 weeks later. Then one final thing happened. I couldn't continue. Something I still can't explain. The stress was destroying me. I quit the warehouse. Management accepted my resignation without argument. Started a different job. Almost like they tried to forget everything. I moved to another state. Nearly 6 months later, started a new job. I received an email. Tried to forget. No subject line. No sender information. For a while it only a single attachment. In last month, something happened. The image showed me something I still standing outside my apartment building. The former timestamp was from earlier that day. Tom, I had never seen anyone taking the Ranger. I zoomed in. He sounded terrified. Closer, and there, reflected in the glass entrance door behind me, was a familiar face, watching from across the street, smiling. Mark. I immediately contacted police. He said the reserve had hired a new employee. Nothing. A night ranger. Dead end. No recently sender, transferred from another facility. No answers. Tom wanted me to see his personnel file. Arrived. He emailed the photographs. No signature. I opened the attachment. No explanation. And immediately tell Ethan we're still looking for him. The photograph showed the new Ranger standing beside a patrol vehicle. because
His
Ethan
name
was
tag
the missing
read
employee,
Ryan Mercer.
the one everyone was
Employee
searching for,
ID
the one who vanished,
4512.
the one
My
who shouldn't have
employee
been
number,
able to send messages,
my identity,
and
my
that's when I
employment
remembered
record.
something that still
Everything
keeps me
belonged
awake at
to
night.
him now.
I
In
called
every
Tom
photograph
immediately.
found inside
He
that
answered on
maintenance
the first
building.
ring. One
Before I
person
could speak,
appeared. He said something that still keeps me
repeatedly in the
awake at
background.
night. Not
Ryan,
Mark. The
not
weird
Ethan.
part isn't that he has your
Someone
name.
else.
Someone investigators never
There was a long
identified.
silence.
Someone standing
Tom
far
whispered,
away. The weird
watching.
part is that he started working
The same
here
figure
6 months
appeared
from
in the
now.
final photo attached to the email.
I didn't understand. Standing behind
Then he sent
me,
another document.
close enough to
It was a
touch my
hiring
shoulder.
record.
Official.
I swear to God.
Stamped. When I turned
Verify.
around after noticing it, the street behind me was completely empty. Story 4. The knocking
start date
started
listed
before
beside
I
the
locked
new
the front
employee's
doors,
name wasn't
which
in the
didn't make
past.
sense because I'd
It
already
wasn't
watched
today.
the last customer
It was
drive
6
away
months
10
in the
minutes
future.
earlier. Yet
3
according
slow
to everyone
knocks.
at the reserve,
Glass
he'd
rattling,
already been
just
working
enough
there
to
for
make me
weeks.
look up from the register.
I stared at the screen for
I
a
remember
long time,
staring toward the entrance,
trying to make
expecting
sense of it.
some drunk guy.
Then I
eating
noticed one
cigarettes.
final detail.
But there was nobody there.
The employee photograph wasn't
Just the
recent.
reflection of the
time
fluorescent
stamp
light
embedded
stretching
in the
across the
image
empty
metadata
parking lot
showed it had
and
been
my own
taken
tired
3
face
nights
staring
earlier,
back at me through
outside
the
my
glass.
current apartment
Then the
building.
payphone outside
Someone
started
had
ringing.
photographed me while
That's
I
what got
slept.
me.
And
Honestly,
standing behind me in the
because the
reflection of
payphone
the
hadn't
window
worked in over
was
a
another
year.
man.
I know that
wearing a
because
ranger
people tried
uniform,
using it all the time
watching
after their
me,
cards got declined
smiling,
at the pumps.
waiting for
The
his
cord
shift
had
to
literally
begin.
been cut by somebody last
Story
week.
3.
The
But it was
radio in my
ringing,
belt exploded
loud,
with static.
sharp.
Then dispatch
Over
said something
and
that made
over.
my blood run
I just
cold.
stood there listening
Log
to it
shows
while the
you
store
already clocked
speakers
out
crackled
42
with
minutes
static
ago.
above me.
The
I
weird
nearly
part
dropped the
was,
flashlight.
every time the phone
I was standing
rang,
alone in the
comp
middle of
number
a
4
forest
would
access
activate by
road,
itself for
3
half a
miles
second.
from the ranger
Just
station.
enough to click.
Still on duty,
Like somebody
still wearing
squeezing
my
the handle
uniform.
outside.
Still
I
carrying
told
my
myself it
equipment.
was electrical
Yet,
issues.
according to
Old
the
station,
system,
storm
my shift had
rolling in.
already ended.
Simple explanation.
And
Someone
someone
using
using
my
my
employee
employee
ID
ID
had
had
signed
signed
out.
I'm
Then
Tyler,
another voice came through the
24,
radio. And back then I
My
worked
voice,
nights at a gas
calm,
station off Route
clear,
81 in northern
close.
Pennsylvania. Graveyard
Yeah,
shift.
I'm heading
11
home now.
p.m. to 6 a.m.
For a second,
Most
forgot how
nights
to
were dead
breathe.
quiet except
because
for
I wasn't
truckers,
talking.
exhausted
My name is
travelers,
Jason Miller,
and the occasional
I
addict
was
wandering
34
in
years
for
old
energy
when
drinks
this
at
happened,
3 in the morning.
and I worked night
It
security
wasn't a bad
patrol at a
job,
wilderness
boring
conservation
mostly,
area outside
which is why I
Missoula,
noticed
Montana.
weird things fast.
The reserve covered nearly
And that night felt
70,000
wrong
acres
almost
of protected
immediately.
forest and
I
mountain
grabbed the key
terrain.
ring and stepped outside to lock the pumps for closing. Most visitors
Cold
left
wind
before
hit me
sunset,
first, leaving
smelled
only
like wet
maintenance
pavement
crews
and diesel
security
fuel.
staff, and the
The
occasional
payphone had
overnight
stopped ringing
research
by then,
team.
but pump
Night
4 was
patrols
still
were
blinking
usually
active.
uneventful.
Click,
Drive the roads,
click,
check the
quick.
gates,
Like
monitor
somebody
the
was lifting the
campsites,
handle
log
repeatedly.
anything unusual.
I walked over
Then
slow
go
home.
Flashlight
Simple.
shaking a little because
At
I
least
was
it was
tired
supposed to be.
and annoyed.
The
And
night
honestly,
everything
already
started
creeped
felt
out.
completely normal.
Nobody there.
I arrived
no
around
car,
9 p.m.
No footprints
Signed
into
the
the
puddles
patrol
around the
system
pump either.
Collected my
I
radio and
reached
truck
down and
keys,
reset the handle,
then reviewed the route
The
assignment.
second I touched it,
My
nothing
radio
unusual
buzzed on my
appeared in
belt.
the logs.
Static
No
first,
incidents,
then a voice.
no maintenance requests.
You closed early
no
tonight.
wildlife alerts.
I nearly dropped
Everything
the
looked
flashlight.
routine.
It sounded like an older
Around
man,
midnight, I
calm,
completed my
low
first
voice,
perimeter loop.
like he was standing
The
right
forest
beside
was
me.
quiet.
Hello?
Cold air drifted through
I
the
said
trees.
into the radio immediately.
My headlights
No
illuminated
answer,
miles of
just
empty
static.
gravel road.
Then the payphone rang
The
again
isolation
behind me.
never bothered me.
I spun around so
Actually,
fast my back
I usually
cracked.
enjoyed it.
The ringing
The
echoed
silence
across
helped
the empty
pass
lot
the
while
hours.
rain started
But
drizzling
that night
harder.
felt different.
And
I
this
couldn't
time,
explain why.
I noticed the
The
receiver
feeling
on the
started
payphone
small,
wasn't hanging anymore.
almost
It was
impossible
dead.
to
That
notice.
was finally moving
Like
in
the
the wind.
sensation that someone
I don't
was
know why I
standing
walked
behind
toward
you
it.
even when
I should
nobody
have
was
gone
there.
inside.
That's
locked
when
the
I
doors,
noticed the first
called
strange
somebody.
detail.
A fresh
There's this
patrol
weird
entry
thing
appeared in
people
the
do
system,
when they're scared,
submitted under
where
my
your brain
employer
wants an
ID.
explanation more than
The
safety.
timestamp was only 5
I
minutes
kept
old.
thinking there had
The
to be
problem
someone
was that
missing
I
with
hadn't
me.
submitted anything.
Some local
The entry
teenagers
claimed
maybe.
I had inspected
I
a
picked
remote
up the receiver.
observation tower.
Dead
I was
silence
nowhere
for
near
about
2
that
seconds.
location.
I assumed it was a
breathing.
software error. Slow.
Maybe the
wet
system
sounding
duplicated an
breathing.
old report.
You
Strange
forgot the
things
back
happen with
freezer.
government software all the
The
time.
voice whispered.
So I ignored
I
it.
hung up instantly.
For another
hour.
My stomach
Then it
dropped
happened
hard,
again. A
because
second
there
patrol
actually was
report
a back
appeared,
freezer storage
again
room
under my
behind the
name.
station.
Again from a
Customers never saw
location
it.
I hadn't
No
visited.
reason anybody
Again
outside
using
would know
details
about
I
it.
never entered.
I
This
went back
time the
inside
report
fast and
included
locked the front
specific
door behind me.
observations.
That's
Gate
when I
secure,
noticed
trail
something worse.
clear, no signs of
freezer hallway
trespassing.
light was
The
on.
wording sounded
I always
exactly
left
like
it off
something I
unless
would
I
write
needed
in.
inventory. That was the
I
part
stood
that
behind the
bothered
counter
me most.
staring at the hallway,
Not just
while
the
the
old
report,
refrigeration
the
units
style,
hummed in the
the
back.
phrasing,
The
even
station
the spelling
suddenly
habits
felt
matched
massive,
mine,
empty
almost
in a bad
perfectly.
way.
That's when I realized
could be
somebody was
standing
using my
anywhere.
credentials. Then the motion
Or
sensor alarm
something was
chimed.
generating reports
1B,
pretending to be
being
me.
movement in aisle 3.
Either
I
explanation
looked
felt bad.
immediately.
Around
Nobody.
1:40 a.m., I
Just shelves of
contacted
chips and
dispatch.
canned soup
The
under
operator
flickering
checked the
fluorescent
system.
lights.
Everything
Another
looked
beep.
legitimate.
This time aisle 5.
According to the records,
then
I
another.
had personally
Aisle
submitted
2.
every report.
Like something was
The
moving around
GPS
the
data
store
matched.
without appearing
The
long
employee
enough for me to
credentials
see it.
matched. The
I grabbed the
timestamps
metal
matched.
flashlight
From the
under
system's
register and walked
perspective,
toward the
nothing
aisles,
was
trying
wrong.
to keep my breathing
Then,
steady.
dispatch
Store
asked a
closed.
question.
I called out.
Jason,
My voice
why are
sounded
you
weak in
submitting
there.
reports
The lights
faster than
buzzed
you can
overhead.
physically drive between
Somewhere in the
locations?
back.
I
Something
didn't know how
metallic
to
hit
answer
the floor.
because I had been wondering
Loud.
the same thing.
I froze instantly.
That's when I noticed something
Then came
worse.
footsteps. The locations
Not
in
running,
the reports
slow
formed a
footsteps.
pattern. Each new
One
entry
after
appeared
another
slightly ahead
behind
of
the
my
freezer
actual
door.
route.
I
Almost like
remember
someone
every
was moving
tiny
through the
detail
reserve
weirdly
before I
clearly.
arrived.
The flickering
Checking
soda
soda
before I
cooler
got
lights,
there.
documenting
Documenting
the
them before
windows,
I could.
the smell of burnt
At
coffee
first I thought
sitting
another
too long
ranger
on the
might be
warmer.
playing some kind of
I
prank.
opened the freezer hallway
But there
door,
weren't enough
slowly,
employees working
and
that
saw
night.
the storage
And
freezer
nobody had
cracked
access
open
to
to
my
my credentials.
credentials. At least
Cold
nobody
vapor
should
spilling
have.
out across the floor.
The deeper
The
I
metal
looked,
shelves
the
inside
stranger
cast
it
long
became.
shadows into the
Every
hallway,
report predicted
and somebody
exactly
was
what I
humming
would find
quietly
later.
in there.
I swear to God,
broken
I almost
signs,
ran immediately.
animal tracks,
But instead,
everything
I said,
matched.
"Hey!" It was as if someone already
Coming
knew what my
stopped.
patrol would
Silence.
discover. Then the radio
And then
on
it
my belt
happened
crackled again. "Don't open it." Same voice. "Called. Close." I backed away from the freezer instantly. Then the lights went out. Completely. Whole station black except for the beer cooler glow behind me. I heard movement immediately. Fast movement. Shoes scraping hard
At
across
2:13
tiles somewhere
a.m.,
near the
I
aisles.
arrived at a remote
I ducked
campsite.
behind the counter and
According
grabbed
to
my
the
phone,
system,
trying
I had
to use
already
the flashlight
inspected it
app while
21
dialing
minutes earlier.
911 at the same
The
time.
report was waiting
But
in the
before
database.
the call connected,
Every
the
detail
backup
matched
generator
reality.
kicked on.
The
Lights
condition of
flickered
the
back
fire
weak
pit.
and yellow.
The
The
position
freezer
of a fallen
hallway
tree
door was
branch.
closed now.
Even a
Completely
damaged
closed.
campsite map.
And the humming had
Things
stopped.
nobody could have
The
known
police
without being
dispatcher
there.
answered while I
My
kept
stomach
staring toward the
tightened.
back.
I checked
told
the
her
area
someone
carefully.
might be inside the station.
No vehicles.
She asked if I could
No
see
footprints.
them. I said no.
No evidence that
Then the
anyone
motion
else had
sensor
visited.
chimed again.
Yet somehow
Aisle
someone
1,
had documented
right
everything
beside the
before
front
I
door.
arrived.
I looked
That's
over
when I
slowly
realized
and
I
saw
was
a
no
man
longer
standing
dealing with
there.
a simple system
I don't know
error.
where he came
Something
from.
else was
Thin
happening.
guy.
Something
Late
impossible.
50s maybe.
I
Gray
started
jacket
driving back
soaked from
toward
rain.
headquarters.
He wasn't moving at all.
The forest filled,
Just standing
different
beside
now.
the gum rack.
Every shadow
staring
looked
at me.
suspicious.
Sir,
Every
I
movement
said.
between the trees
He
caught
smiled
my attention.
slightly. The
Not
radio
friendly,
remained silent
just
for
enough
nearly
to make
20
me
minutes.
uncomfortable.
Then
Then he looked toward the back hallway and said, "You shouldn't
Unit
stay
7,
after 3."
returning to station.
The dispatcher kept
My
talking
voice.
in my ear, asking if I was
Exactly
safe,
my
but I
voice.
barely heard
The
her.
same tone.
The man walked
same
toward the coffee
cadence.
station
The
slowly.
same slight Montana
I noticed
accent.
something strange immediately.
I immediately grabbed the microphone.
His clothes were soaked from outside
Dispatch.
rain.
Did you hear
But there
that?
were no wet
A pause
footprints
followed.
behind him.
Then the operator
None.
answered.
He stopped
what?
near the coffee
I felt my
machines
heart
and looked
sink
toward the security
because the
monitors
transmission
mounted above
had
the
sounded
register.
perfectly clear.
Did he call
Loud
you
enough
too?
to make me jump?
Yes, quietly.
Yet dispatch claimed
I didn't
nothing had
answer.
come through.
My entire
Everybody
body
felt
recording
cold
function on my
suddenly.
radio.
Then all
the
6
transmission was
security
there.
screens went
My
black
voice
at once.
recorded,
Every monitor
stored, real.
gone. But nobody
The
else
man
seemed able
sighed
to
like
hear
he'd
it.
seen it before.
That's when I noticed something
Yeah,
worse.
he muttered.
The recording
That's
included
bad.
background noise.
Then the payphone
Footsteps.
outside started
Heavy
ringing
boots
again.
walking across gravel.
Loud enough to
A
hear
vehicle
through the
engine.
glass.
A station door
The man
opening.
stared
the
towards
sounds
it
of someone
without
ending
moving.
their shift.
Don't answer it this time.
My shift,
he said.
Around
Seriously,
2:50 a.m., I
I asked
returned
him
to the
who he
ranger
was.
station.
He ignored
The
me.
parking lot was
Instead,
empty.
he walked slowly
At
toward
least
the
at
front
first
windows.
glance.
That's
Then
when
my
I noticed
headlights
the pickup
hooked
truck
across a
parked
vehicle,
at pump 4,
parked beside the
black
maintenance
truck.
building.
Headlights off.
My patrol truck.
I swear it hadn't been
The
there
exact
30
same
seconds
truck.
earlier. Rain
Same
dripped
unit
off the
number.
hood.
Same
Driver
markings.
door hanging slightly
Same
open.
damage on the rear
The man
bumper.
beside the coffee
I
station
slammed the
looked
brakes.
terrified suddenly.
My real truck sat
Not nervous,
beneath me,
terrified.
The duplicate sat 50
You need to lock
yards
the
away.
office door, he
Both
whispered.
couldn't exist.
Right now.
Yet there
Then
they
all the
were.
lights flickered
Two
again.
identical vehicles.
Just once.
I grabbed my
But during that
flashlight
split
and
second
approached
of darkness,
carefully.
the truck was
duplicate truck
suddenly
looked
closer.
real, not
Not
abandoned.
possible.
No
It
fresh
was somehow
mud coated
parked
the tires.
directly outside the
The
entrance
engine
now.
felt warm.
Engine
Like it had
still
been
off.
running recently.
Driver door still
Inside
hanging open.
sat a patrol notebook. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe
I
right.
opened it.
The
Every
old man
page
backed
contained
away from the
entries
windows
written in my
immediately.
handwriting.
He
Not
knows you
copied,
saw him, he
not
said.
forged.
Who?
Written
I
naturally.
snapped.
Like I
Before
had
he
personally
answered,
completed
the station phone rang
The
behind
final
the counter.
entry made my
I
hand
jumped.
shake.
The caller
Shift
ID just
complete.
said unknown.
Clocked out.
The old man
2:08
stared
a.m.
out at but didn't move.
Employees.
It kept
Jason
ringing
Miller.
over and over.
The timestamp.
Finally, I
was
answered.
40 minutes earlier.
Static filled the
I was
line
still
for
on
a
duty
second.
at 2:08.
Then my own voice
I
said,
had never written it.
"He's behind the cooler."
Yet there it was.
I hung up
signed with my
immediately and
signature.
turned toward the beer cooler.
That's when I
aisle.
realized something
Nothing
terrifying.
there.
But the
Whoever
cooler door at the
completed that
very end
notebook
was swinging
believes the
slowly
shift
open
was
and
over.
shut by itself.
Because from their
The
perspective,
old man started walking
it already
backward
was.
toward the employee exit.
And then it happened again.
Nope.
Footsteps
He muttered,
echoed somewhere
"Not
behind
tonight."
me. Slow.
I yelled at him
steady,
not to leave me there
approaching.
alone, but he
Crunch,
ignored me completely and
crunch.
disappeared through the side
I
door
spun
into
around.
the rain.
Nothing.
I rushed to
Only
lock
darkness.
it behind him.
When
The
I turned
beam
back
from my
around, the
flashlight
store was
cut
empty
through
again.
rows of trees,
Completely empty.
no movement. No truck
person.
outside anymore either.
No explanation.
Just rain. Then the
I waited
footsteps
for
stopped.
police
sitting behind the counter,
Directly
gripping
behind
that
me.
flashlight so
Close
hard my
enough
hand cramped that I should have seen whoever
They
made
arrived
them.
about 12 minutes
My
later.
radio crackled.
2 deputies searched
Why are you
everything.
still here?
Freezer.
My voice.
Bathrooms.
Not
Roof
angry.
access.
Not threatening.
Nothing.
Just
No
confused.
signs of forced
As
entry.
if someone genuinely
No truck
expected
caught on
me to be
nearby
gone
traffic
already.
cameras either.
I backed away.
They thought
toward
it was
my truck.
probably stress.
The radio spoke
Maybe
again.
somebody messing around
But you
outside.
already left.
But one deputy
Every hair
looked
on my arm
uncomfortable
stood
after
up.
checking the
I
security
drove
system.
away immediately.
Around
Faster
3:07
than I
a.m.,
probably should have.
every camera
The
in the
gravel
store
road
had
cut to
blurred
static
beneath
for
the headlights.
exactly 4
I
minutes.
didn't stop until
During
reaching
those
the
4
administration
minutes,
building near
one
the main
frame
entrance.
appeared on screen
Other
before
employees
footage
were there.
resumed.
Real people.
Just one frame.
Real lights.
It showed me
Real
standing
activity.
behind the register
For the
alone.
first time all night,
completely
I felt slightly
still,
safer.
looking
Then
directly into the
dispatch called me
camera.
inside.
Except
The look on her
something
face
was
told me
standing
something was
beside
wrong.
me.
She
Tall,
turned her monitor
blurry,
toward me.
almost out of
Employee
frame,
records filled the
and
screen.
it looked like it was leaning
My
close to
profile
my
was
ear.
Shift
The
status.
deputy asked if someone had
completed.
been near me then.
Clock
I
out
said
time.
no.
2:08 a.m.
He didn't answer after
Supervisor
that.
approval.
Just printed the frame
Verified.
quietly and folded it into his
GPS
pocket.
return location.
I quit 2 days
Confirmed.
later. Everything showed
The
that I had
station
ended
got
my shift.
demolished
The
last
system
fall
believed I
after
was
a
no
fire
longer
in the
there.
storage room.
The system believed
Nobody
I had
was
already
hurt.
gone home. At least that's what the
That's
article
when I
said.
noticed something
But
worse.
sometimes,
Attached
usually
to the
late at
clock out
night,
record was
I still
security
think about
footage.
that phone call.
The camera showed the
My
station
own
entrance
voice
at
warning me
2:08
somebody
a.m.
was behind the
A
cooler.
ranger walked through the door.
Because here's the
My
thing I
uniform,
never told the police.
My build. My
When I
face.
turned toward the cooler
He
after
handed
the
over
call,
equipment. For just a
signed
second,
paperwork,
I saw
clocked
someone
out,
duck behind the
then
shelves.
left. The
Same
video
height as
quality
me.
was perfect.
Same jacket.
No glitches.
Same face.
No distortions.
Story
no
5.
missing frames. The
The
ranger
person on
locked the fire
screen was
tower at
me.
exactly 11:52
And yet at that
p.m.
exact moment,
I
had
remember
been
the
miles
time
away
because
in
my
the
radio
forest.
started screaming seconds later.
Not
Not management,
static,
not
not
IT.
interference.
Somebody
Not law
was whispering
enforcement.
directly into
The
it.
footage remained
Quiet,
authentic.
panicked. The timestamps remained
Repeating
accurate.
the same sentence
The records
over and
remained
over.
verified.
Don't let him upstairs.
Officially, the
The
incident
problem
became
was,
an unresolved
I was already
administrative
alone
error.
upstairs.
I was
Unofficially,
working seasonal
everyone
night watch
stopped
in the Black
talking
Hills
about it.
National Forest.
I
in South
resigned 3
Dakota
weeks
during
later.
late November.
I moved out of
My
Montana.
job was simple.
Started over.
Watch for
tried to
illegal
forget.
campfires for nearly
Monitor
a year
storm
at work.
movement.
Then last
report
month I
anything
received an
unusual on
email.
the old Ranger
No sender,
frequencies.
no subject.
Most nights were
just an
painfully
attachment.
boring.
Wind through
A
dead
copy of a
trees,
patrol
coyotes
log.
somewhere in the
My
dark.
patrol log.
The tower
dated 3
creaking
nights
softly
earlier.
every few minutes.
The
like
location
it was settling
listed
into
wasn't
the mountain.
Montana. The ranger
It wasn't
assigned to
even
my
a
route
wilderness
was named
reserve.
Keller.
It was the
Older
city
guy,
where I live
maybe
now.
early 60s.
The final entry
Quiet.
read,
Always
subject
looked
observed
exhausted.
returning home. The first
Shift
thing he told me
continues.
before my shift started
At
was
first I
strange
thought
enough
it
to
would
some
stick
kind of
with me.
sick joke. If somebody
Then I looked
knocks after
closer.
midnight, he
The
said,
observation
call
notes
me
described
before you
my
answer.
apartment building.
My
I
parking
laughed,
space. The
because I
clothes I
thought
had
he'd
been
been
wearing that
tourists.
night.
He
Someone
didn't
had
watch
watched
me.
back recently. The final line sat alone at the bottom of the page, written in my handwriting. Around 10 p.m., the
similar.
fog rolled in hard
Mine.
enough to erase
Exactly
the forest
mine.
below the tower.
It said,
Original I couldn't even see the lower
employees still
staircase
believe
anymore.
clocked out.
I didn't sleep that night.
My flashlight
beam
beam
just disappeared
Instead,
into
I
white
reviewed the
haze.
attachment.
Again and again. Eventually, I noticed something hidden in the metadata, a GPS coordinate. I entered it into a map. The location appeared immediately. My apartment complex, specifically the parking lot outside my bedroom window. I looked outside. Nothing moved. Everything seemed normal. Then I saw
That
a
kind
vehicle
of
parked
isolation
across the
does
street.
something to your head
A
after
white
a few
patrol
hours.
truck. Same
Every
model,
sound feels
same
closer
markings,
than it should.
same unit
And then
number.
I heard footsteps
The exact
below me.
truck I left behind
Slow
in Montana.
footsteps. Metal stairs.
Its headlights
groaning one
remained
at a
off.
time.
Its engine
At first,
wasn't
I
running,
assumed Keller had come
but
back.
someone sat inside.
But nobody called up.
Watching my
Nobody
apartment.
used the radio, watching my window.
The footsteps climbed halfway,
watching me,
then stopped.
I couldn't see the face.
Silence.
Not
I
clearly.
leaned over the railing
Just
with
the
my
outline of a
flashlight.
man in a ranger
Nothing.
uniform.
Just
a man
fog
who looked
drifting
very
around the
familiar.
staircase.
That's
That's when
when
my
was gone
radio
by
crackled
sunrise.
again.
Why did
But
you
every
lock
few
me out?
weeks I still
The
received
voice
patrol
sounded
reports.
exactly like Keller.
They arrive without
I
warning.
grabbed the radio
always
immediately.
written in my handwriting.
Keller, where are
always
you?
describing things I
No
haven't done
response.
yet.
Just
And every
breathing.
report ends the
Wet
same
breathing.
way.
Then the
Shift
transmission
active.
cut off.
The strange
That's
part
when I
is that
noticed
my
something
former
worse.
employer confirmed something
The
recently.
padlock on the tower
According
hatch
to
was
their
hanging
records,
from the outside
I
latch.
never resigned.
Locked.
I never transferred.
I stared at it for
I
a
never
solid
left.
5 seconds, trying to
As far as
understand
the
what I
system
was
is
seeing.
concerned,
There was
Jason
no way that
Miller
made
is still
sense.
working nights.
I was standing
Still filing
inside the
reports.
tower, but the
Still
lock was
clocking
fastened
out.
from the
And
outside.
apparently,
My
still
hands
coming
started
back.
shaking instantly.